There comes a point in life when you simply cease chasing, cease striving to please, cease attempting to gain acceptance. It is precisely at this juncture that everything begins to align. How often have you felt you were overexerting yourself to become someone others would approve of? How frequently have you been consumed by the anxiety of appearing a certain way, of meeting expectations, of achieving success, only to increasingly lose sight of yourself? Today, I wish to share a narrative, yet it's not merely a common tale. It is a looking glass. It reflects me, you, and anyone who has desperately sought to make it in a world that prizes facades more than authenticity. This notion of ceasing to care as a pivotal turning point might initially sound hazardous, even irresponsible. After all, from an early age, we are taught to concern ourselves with everything, with what others think, with the ideal career, with societal norms, with likes, with performance. But what if this instruction is slowly eroding us from within? Carl Jung posited that what you resist persists. Perhaps this holds the key. Perhaps the more we strive to control, to appease, and to conform, the further we drift from who we truly are, and the more internal resistance we generate. This contemplation originated from a text that circulated widely online, yet it resonates deeply because it addresses something fundamental. It is a philosophy of detachment, not indifference, but rather liberation. Inspired by thinkers such as Jung, Nietzsche, and even Stoics like Seneca and Epictetus, this idea unveils a truth most of us are unprepared to hear. You only discover your true self when you stop attempting to be something else. And that is precisely what this content aims to reveal to you through stories, insights, and questions you may never have posed. Together, we will traverse the 7 stages of a journey that begins in weariness and culminates in awakening. But before anything else, breathe and listen with an open heart, because this is not about giving up. It is about finally starting. Have you ever noticed how we are perpetually striving to get there, but where exactly is there? From childhood, we are programmed to pursue the highest grades, the ideal physique, the dream job, the perfect relationship. We live as though we are on a treadmill, constantly moving yet going nowhere. The South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han, in his book The Burnout Society, speaks precisely about this. According to him, we inhabit an era where freedom has transformed into oppression because we are now slaves to ourselves. No one compels us to do anything anymore. We compel ourselves to perform, to succeed, to be our best version all the time. And this is profoundly exhausting. I myself have been there, attempting to validate my worth, trying to demonstrate that I was intelligent enough, productive enough, good enough, striving to be seen, acknowledged, accepted. But do you know what happened at the end of the day? I would lie down with an empty soul because everything I was trying to build had nothing to do with me. It was merely a facade. And you? How many parts of you are being shaped by the fear of not being enough? How many decisions do you make, not because they are genuine, but because they are safe, socially acceptable, correct? This marks the starting point of transformation, the recognition of exhaustion. The moment you realize you can no longer continue, that living to please everyone is a slow emotional suicide, that trying to be someone else is the best way to forget who you truly are. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius said, "It is foolish to attempt to please others. It is wiser to live in harmony with one's own nature." But how does one accomplish this in a world where your nature seems perpetually in conflict with external expectations? It is simple and painful. You must stop. Not stop living, but stop pretending. Stop fighting battles that aren't yours. Stop carrying burdens that do not belong to you. Stop trying to be someone else to begin remembering who you are. And this remembrance commences in silence, in emptying oneself, in the relinquishment of the character. But we will comprehend this better in the next segment. Have you ever felt you are constantly trying to fit into an invisible mold? That no matter how much you try to please, to conform, to belong, there is always an underlying discomfort, a demand, an anguish that persists? The truth is, we live in an age where caring too much has become a silent prison. Caring excessively about what others think, what they expect of you, what you should be, a prison of often unstated but deeply entrenched expectations. This discourse is the product of days of profound reflection on something many of us experience but rarely pause to analyze: the impact of carrying the world on our shoulders without anyone asking us to. And, more importantly, what happens when you simply decide to release that burden. This is what we will discuss here, but do not expect a superficial motivational speech. This is a journey through the ideas of Jung, Nietzsche, Seneca, Epictetus, and through the narratives of real people, both ancient and contemporary, who grasped, through hardship or by choice, that true power emerges when you stop attempting to appease the world and begin living in alignment with your own center. We live in times where people are falling ill due to an excess of image, where an individual's worth is conflated with their capacity for external validation. And it is not difficult to comprehend why this occurs. Carl Jung asserted that the greatest dilemma of modern man is his severed connection with his instincts. In other words, we forget who we are because we are constantly striving to be what others expect. This disconnection, this emptiness, this perpetual anxiety are symptoms of a brutal estrangement from what makes us human. We are ceaselessly attempting to fill a void with recognition, with validation, with likes, with acceptance. But no one taught us that this void cannot be filled from the outside. Throughout this discussion, we will deconstruct this cycle. We will comprehend why ceasing to care, in the profound sense of the word, can be the genesis of everything. It is not about becoming an insensitive, self-centered, or indifferent being. It is about liberating oneself from the need for approval, living with authenticity, and paradoxically discovering lightness and success when you choose to release what was never yours to carry. The story we are about to tell is yours, it is mine. It is that of every human being who at some point in life realized they were exhausted and chose to change. Imagine a young person who, from an early age, learned to measure their self-worth by the grades they achieved in school, then by the approving gaze of their parents, subsequently by the number of friends they had, and later by professional accomplishments, salary, house, body, ideal partner. This narrative is common. It is the story of nearly all of us, and it is also the story of a cycle that never ends until you decide to break it. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, claimed that one is free who lives according to their nature, not according to the opinions of others. But what occurs when, from childhood, you are conditioned to depend on this opinion for everything? You become a slave to performance, a slave to the external gaze, a slave to the expectations of others. This cycle is insidious. It doesn't begin with grand decisions, but with minor concessions. You accept a job you dislike because it is the right thing to do. You enter a relationship out of fear of being alone. You say yes when you wanted to say no. You mold yourself to fit where there is no space for your truth. And the most alarming aspect is that often this is encouraged by those we love most. Parents, friends, teachers, colleagues, all fundamentally striving for the best, but the best within a flawed logic. Nietzsche spoke of the importance of becoming who you are. But how does one become something one was never permitted to be? The answer is simple yet painful. First, you must unlearn. Unlearn seeking approval. Unlearn measuring your worth by external standards. Unlearn trying to be loved for something you are not. This unlearning is the dawn of freedom, and it is also the beginning of a profound internal journey, perhaps the most arduous of all. In contemporary times, this captivity has assumed new forms. Social media, for instance, are constant showcases for approval. The feed has become a stage, life a performance, and any misstep can signify rejection. We live in an era where being authentic is perilous, yet essential, because it is only when you dare to be who you are, even if it incurs disapproving glances, rejection, judgments, that you begin to build something solid within yourself. Epictetus stated, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But if you react to everything based on the fear of not being accepted, who is living your life? Ceasing to care in this sense is an act of courage. It is the first stride toward escaping the invisible prison. And like every act of courage, it hurts because it disturbs everything built upon illusion, but it also liberates. And as Jung said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Or the next step is to comprehend the origin of this need to please and how it becomes so deeply ingrained so early that we don't even realize we were shaped by it. The need to please is a seed sown early in childhood. We learn that love comes with conditions, that our acceptance depends on how much we obey, how good we are, how much we conceal our most authentic impulses. Thus, what Carl Jung termed the persona is formed, the social mask we wear to survive in society. The persona is necessary. It allows us to live in community, build relationships, and fulfill role. But when we conflate ourselves with this mask, we lose contact with the self, the authentic core of our psyche. Imagine a child who, upon expressing sadness, is labeled weak, upon showing anger is punished, upon having doubts is ignored. This child learns to silence themselves, learns to smile even when in pain, learns that being loved means concealing parts of themselves. And time passes. They grow up, study, work, have relationships, but something within them remains incomplete, a void that no achievement can fill. This is the reality for many adults today. They live seemingly functional lives but carry within them an existential emptiness they cannot explain. This void is the price of a life lived to please. Jung stated, "What you resist persists, what you accept transforms." When we resist the truth of who we are, when we hide our shadows to please, they do not vanish. They deepen and one day erupt in the form of crises, anxieties, depressions, psychosomatic illnesses. Stoic philosophy also points to this dilemma. Epictetus invites us to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. But is pleasing others within our control? Are the opinions of others within our control? Clearly not. Nevertheless, many of us base our very identity on these uncontrollable factors. It is necessary to acknowledge that this need to please is a form of survival, but a survival that, over time, slowly kills us from within. Only by confronting this wound can we begin a healing process. Healing commences with permission to be imperfect, to displease, to say no, to frustrate expectations, to be what we truly are, even if the world does not know what to do with it. In current times, this process is even more challenging. We live under the logic of image, performance, calculated success. Showing vulnerability is almost a subversive act, but it is precisely this vulnerability that connects us to what is most human. When we stop constantly protecting ourselves, when we cease trying to please everyone, we begin to find space for self-knowledge, and with it, a type of power that does not depend on external validation. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." But for this, one must abandon the project of pleasing the world. In the next segment, we will explore what occurs when you make this decision, when, for the first time, you choose yourself, even if it costs the loss of certain relationships, roles, and certainties. Ceasing to care doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and like every profound process, it often begins with a breakdown. Typically, this turning point occurs during moments of crisis. A loss, a breakup, burnout, an existential collapse. That feeling of, I can't do this anymore, this makes no sense. It is at this juncture that many, unknowingly, begin the journey back to themselves. The philosopher Martin Heidegger referred to this as ontological anguish, not merely a sadness, but a deep discomfort of living a life that is not yours, of occupying a role written by others, of being a stranger to oneself. These ruptures, however painful, are invitations to question everything, to confront directly what has been ignored for years. When you begin to say no to what doesn't represent you, something magical happens. False connections start to dissolve. Relationships that existed solely due to your constant attempts to please begin to disappear. Tasks that once seemed urgent now prove futile. Masks fall away. Silences become revelations. And here lies one of the greatest challenges, the solitude of awakening. Many individuals, upon liberating themselves from the need to please, face a period of isolation. After all, a large portion of their relationships were built upon concessions, masks, performances. When this collapses, what remains? This emptiness is frightening, but it is also fertile, because for the first time, you begin to choose consciously. You start to filter what enters your life. You begin to reconstruct, brick by brick, an existence that makes sense. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche describes the spirit's process of evolution, dying as the camel, the burden bearer, becoming the lion, the one who says no, and finally, the child, the one who creates itself. This journey is arduous, but it is the path of authenticity. In an age of superficiality, those who choose to live deeply pay a price. But the value of living in harmony with oneself is immeasurable. This chapter marks the turning point. It is where the pain of deconstruction begins to make way for the freedom of reconstruction. In the next chapter, we will understand what begins to flourish when you no longer live to please, but to simply be. After the storm of detachment comes a strange stillness, an emptiness that initially seems daunting, but it is precisely from this void that the first seeds of authenticity begin to sprout. Without the constraints of the need to please, you begin to observe yourself with greater clarity. The impulses that were once suppressed now have space to emerge. What truly drives you, what paralyzes you, what genuinely belongs to you. This is where Søren Kierkegaard's philosophy becomes relevant. For him, despair arises when we live estranged from our true selves, and healing begins when we accept this anguish as part of the process of becoming who we truly are. You begin to reconstruct your own narrative with more silence, with more listening, with more presence. Small decisions previously overlooked gain significance. How you spend your time, who you associate with, what you consume. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, a creative force that emerges when we cease living in relation to others, when we stop reacting and begin to act. And acting here does not signify becoming productive or efficient. It means aligning action with inner truth. It is when you begin to say yes only to what resonates with what you feel. This is the beginning of integrity. Curiously, when you cease to concern yourself with external validation, you begin to attract people and opportunities more aligned with who you genuinely are. It is as if the world responds to your truth, but this only occurs after you allow yourself to traverse the desert of emptiness, without shortcuts, without masks. And then, for the first time, a new feeling emerges: peace. There is a type of silent strength that needs no display. It arises when you understand that you owe nothing to anyone but yourself. This is not arrogance. It is freedom. Seneca, in his letters, wrote, "The soul that has attained wisdom is invulnerable." This invulnerability does not stem from being emotionally unreachable, but from no longer depending on approval for existence. From this point onward, you begin to live with greater lightness. Not because life has become easy, but because you have ceased carrying the burden of performance. You no longer need to prove you are good enough, no longer need to compete, nor explain your choices to those unwilling to comprehend. It is here that a paradox arises. By ceasing to care about the superficial, you care more, but in the right way. You care about what holds meaning, what builds, what transforms. You stop living at the mercy of fleeting opinions and turn toward the fundamentals of your existence. Clarity emerges, direction is revealed, actions cease to be impulsive and become intentional. And when someone attempts to manipulate you with guilt, fear, or emotional blackmail, you simply do not respond, because that language no longer reaches you. You are on a different plane, not above, simply outside the game of ego disputes, of compulsive pleasing, of the need to be seen. You already see yourself, already recognize yourself, already suffice for yourself. Ultimately, all of this is about returning. Returning to what was lost in childhood, returning to what was buried for the sake of acceptance, returning to being. The philosopher Plotinus stated that self-knowledge is a journey of returning to the origin, to the one, not in a religious sense, but as a metaphor for reconnecting with essence. This essence does not need to be created, it needs to be unveiled. By ceasing to care about the superficial, you begin to care about the essential. Gradually, life regains its flavor. Deeper relationships emerge. Solitude transforms into inner companionship. Unanswered questions no longer bother you. They are part of the dance of mystery. You no longer rush, nor fear, nor need control. There is an emotional maturity that allows you to navigate difficulties with serenity. And this is rare, precious, powerful. When you stop caring, it does not mean you have become indifferent. It means your attention is now directed toward what truly matters. And this is true freedom, choosing what to care about. The world around you may not understand this change.